Okay, so my name is Dan Johnson. My volunteer role in aviation is that of president of the Light Aircraft Manufacturers Association, or LAMA. LAMA is definitely a volunteer organization, no salaries, but we do collect some dues from the producer community so that we can go to Washington and talk to people about the regulations that are coming, and that's what this talk is going to be about. We've done that a number of times. We're not doing that anymore, as you can imagine. There's nobody in Washington. All the FAA guys we have talked to that produced the information that I'll present here today, we went to their homes. Well, not really. We Zoomed to their homes. So I've talked to a number of FAA people sitting in their living rooms or whatever. That was kind of a different experience, but it got us the information that we wanted, and that's a good thing. So that said, right now FAA is entering into a period they call ex parte, which is a Latin term mainly meaning they won't talk to us anymore. That's because they are in the proposal stage now, and the internal people that are looking at things want to do that without outside changes coming in. They are still willing to hear from us, but they are not willing to talk to us anymore. So this is the latest information since that period has begun. Good. So I'm glad you're here at the expo. The first slide had an image about the 9/11. I hope you all saw that beautiful flight that Chris and I don't know who the pilot was arranged, flying the flag around 19 years ago. This country had a big change. We just had another one this year, so I guess we're getting used to a lot of changes, but that one was a bad one back then too, and we want to remember all those who were lost then. But that said, I'm really glad to see so many of you here. I hope you'll enjoy what I have to say, but more importantly than that, I hope you'll get out there and look at airplanes and go flying if you're comfortable doing that. And that's what this show is really about. We're so thankful to Chris Collins and his entire team, an army of orange-shirted volunteers. Without them, this doesn't happen. But Chris is the leader of the band. So if you see Chris, please give him a thank you for making sure this happens now the 12th year. I missed one only, and I regretted that. It was a hurricane. I live in Florida, and when hurricanes happen, they get your attention. So I didn't make it one year, but we've been here ever since. Okay, next slide. We'll get right into it now. The entire world is impacted by the regulation that is going to come. Other CAAs, civil aviation organizations, administrations, that's what it's usually called in other countries. We call it FAA here, but they're the same. Every country has one. Many of them do whatever FAA does, because our FAA, with 50,000 employees and a big budget, can do things that many countries just can't do, and FAA does a pretty good job of it. So it's easy for them to go, oh, well, if FAA did it, we'll do it too. So what you see here is going to proliferate through the rest of the world, and then they'll go a little further, and then we'll catch up, and it's back and forth arrangement. That's a good thing. It's kind of competition between governments, which is not a bad thing. The Light Aircraft Manufacturers Association, as I said, a very small organization, so we teamed up with another one that you see up there called the U.S. Ultralight Association, and the difference is this. When we LAMA go out and do things, we're trying to help the producer community. It's not that we don't think about pilots. We think about pilots all the time, but we support the producer community so they can do a great job of making excellent airplanes. Something out there has got to appeal to you if you're a pilot, I would hope, and we want to help support those companies. Almost all of them. The biggest of them are small companies. So we need to respect the fact that these companies just can't do everything, and FAA does not want to talk to every single one of them. We have almost 100 manufacturers of light sport aircraft, and then more of light kit aircraft, and even more of ultralight aircraft. And yes, ultralight aircraft, Part 103 vehicles, are having actually an amazing run. Every producer I know of a Part 103 aircraft is backed up with orders. That didn't used to be the case 5-10 years ago. It's definitely the situation now. Part 103 is alive and well. I'm going to touch on that as well. But the USUA was a great partner for us, led by a man named Roy Beiswinger, who's also on the LAMA board, so he's really a dual-purpose person. But USUA looks out for pilots. So that way LAMA looks out for the aircraft producers, USUA looks out for the pilots, and between the two of them, we think we're serving the community pretty well. Okay, next slide, please. So I want to point out that what this rule has often been called is, somebody shortened it, I don't know who did this, I don't think it was FAA, I think it might have been EAA, shortened it to Mosaic. which if you'll go to the next slide kind of spells it out for you a little bit. The FAA loves these kinds of terms, so whoever made it up is right there kind of language and all. But basically, it's a whole work in process. Now, LAMA started its work to talk to the FAA back in 2014, so we were pretty well ahead of it. At that time was exactly 10 years since the rule had come out allowing light sport aircraft and doing a job on ultralight aircraft, unfortunately. Some of that has been fixed since, some of it's still to do, but that's when we said, look, we've been at this now for 10 years. In the first couple of years, a very highly ranked FAA guy presented to the community of producers and said, you guys get a D grade, D like Delta grade. That's not a good grade. And he was right, because at the time, the manufacturers didn't understand how this business of industry consensus standards worked. Hard to beat out a helicopter for sound. And so he was right to fault the companies because they hadn't really wired into the thing as well as they could. Now, some companies were better at it than others, but the laggards, the ones that he was talking about, they weren't doing quite the stuff FAA wanted them to do. That changed in a few years, though. By 2008, 2009, that had mostly cleared up, but we wanted to make sure that FAA heard what we had to say. So we went to the community and we said, okay, what do you want? Producers, pilots. We had FAA people in the room as well. We had other membership organizations, EAA, AOPA, the general aviation manufacturers, the guys that do the big airplanes like we do for small airplanes. All those people had contributions. We had a list of 26 things we thought they should change. And somebody said, forget it. If you go to the FAA with 26 things, you're not going to get anything because you'll overwhelm them with requests or asks all at once. And we went, you know what, you're probably right. So we narrowed it down and narrowed it down, and we came up with 4 things, which I'll touch on here. But since then, it's gone bigger than that. So next slide, please, Carol. So here's the 2020 update. These are the things that are the highlights. This is not everything. I'll touch on a couple other things here. But you all heard about higher weight. It's not really higher weight. What they mean now is that this will be a formula-based thing. Touch on that in a moment. But it's not going to be the 3,600-pound number that you heard about 2 years ago in the fall of 2018. EAA's Jack Pelton made this statement in her casual remarks in front of an AOPA crowd. And he was just speaking extemporaneously, or winging it, if you will. And that was an inappropriate statement, and they later walked that back. However, they may be that heavy. Probably the limit will be around 3,000, but it won't be a limit at 3,000. It will be, can you meet this formula, which has to do with wing loading and stall. And so if it's a larger aircraft, it can weigh more, but it's still got to be safe, simple, and easy to fly. That's FAA's mantra for this space. Other things, yes, 4 seats are coming. Now, they may come as something new that FAA kind of sprung on us just in the last couple of months called Light Personal Aircraft, or LPA. I don't know if that's going to stick or not. I don't know if any of this is going to stick. This has to go through FAA's legal department. And if some of you remember back in 2001 and 2 and 3, everybody at EAA at Oshkosh, the show that didn't happen this year, were excitedly saying, the regulation's coming, the regulation's coming. Years went by, 3 years went by before it actually came. Why was that? One reason. The medical part got shot down by FAA legal, and they just couldn't get over that, and somebody finally twisted their arms enough, and they got over it, and we have what we have today because of that. But one thing held that up. This is a much bigger rule than that. It replaces several other rules. Under the Trump administration, they are required to reduce regulations. This doesn't seem like a reduction in regulations because it's big, but it actually replaces several others, and it is simpler. So they did follow the mandate of the president, and it's going to be good for us, I think. But, you know, with change always comes things that we all struggle with a little bit. Well, how's it going to affect me? How am I going to behave? What should I do now? Should I buy now? Should I not buy now? We'll talk about when, but basically, if you're interested in an airplane now, unless you've got your whole lifetime ahead of you, I wouldn't wait, because these airplanes out here will all still be allowed, but there's going to be some new stuff coming. The new stuff will probably be more expensive because it's going to be more capable. They will also go a little faster. We don't know exactly how much, but I wouldn't be surprised to see 140 knots, 145 knots capable for the faster airplanes, which will cover some other ones we'll look at. They will also finally allow electric. That was never, FAA never meant to eliminate electric, but they said they didn't want turbine engines on these aircraft, so they said reciprocating only. Well, reciprocating only means no electric. And they admit this, but they went, well, now it's in the regulation. You know, now we can't change that easily. So that change is finally coming, but they broadened it themselves to include hybrid. I'll show you an example of that in a moment. Also, another very poorly treated segment, I believe, is the gyro planes, which have had tremendous success in Europe and around the world. Have had it here too, but not as fully built aircraft. You have to build it as a kit. That's not optimal. Most of the manufacturers have learned how to work with that, but it's not the best arrangement. That's going to change. Pretty sure of that one. Single lever control means an in-flight adjustable prop, but one which works automatically. The pilot doesn't do anything, nothing at all. Move the throttle where you want it. The engine and the system responds to that. Of course, that'll add expense. So would a constant speed prop. But at least for those that really want that, it's coming. And for Llama, the big one is the last one, meaning that we have asked them to let us do work with these airplanes. Not all kinds of work, but certain kinds of work. Searching for lost people, pipeline patrols, forestry surveys, all kinds of things. And we went to FAA and we said, well, we want to do this. And they said, well, it's not allowed in the regulation. We said, yes, we know that. We generally know the regulation better than they do, as it turns out, because we live in it all the time and they go in and out of it, sometimes airlines, sometimes us. So they can be forgiven for not knowing it as well as we do. But we said, yes, we know that, but we believe these airplanes are capable of it, and you already allow it. And we were talking to a bunch of the big shot executives at the time, and a bunch of eyebrows went up around the room like, what are you talking about? I said, you already allow flight instruction. You already allow towing. You already allow demo for sales purposes. I mean, instruction's got to be one of the places where accidents happen as much as any place else. Ag flying is a little higher in accident rates, but accidents happen in instructions. Fortunately, not many fatalities, but accidents do. So we said, you're already allowing these things. Why not allow a qualified pilot to take, I don't know, I'm just looking at this airplane right out here, the Aeropract, that could absolutely go up and do certain kinds of work. And if it was limited and you knew what they could do, why not? That gives these, now why is that important to you? Maybe none of you want to do that, and that's okay, but if that manufacturer can sell a few more airplanes because somebody's got a work purpose for the airplane, they will make more money, they can keep their business going, they can serve you better. So even if that's not your goal, we think it's important. And we said, look, we've kept our nose clean for a long time. You admit, FAA, that our safety record is what they say acceptable, which is about as high praise as you're going to get out of them from a safety standpoint. And we want you to allow this. And they said, well, okay, we'll look at it. We don't know if that will happen. We don't know if any of this will happen, but we think it will. Next slide, please, Carol. So now we're going to, I want to touch on this because I've had a lot of questions about this. Aren't we going to ask for some changes in Part 103? Couldn't we have a little more weight, a little more speed? There's the answer. Lots of people inside FAA, from way at the top to down at the working level and out in the field and everywhere else, say, you do not want to ask for change, any change in this regulation, because as soon as you open the door, other things will come in. And the other things will injure an area that is, I think, aviation's most interesting regulation. 1 8.5 11 piece of paper printed on both sides is the entire regulation for Part 103. That's a fantastic thing. Look at any other regulation. Most of them are chapters and verses that go on forever. So we will not ask for any changes, at least yet. You know, maybe in the future. I'm not ruling it out entirely, but we don't want them to change the rule that was created in 1982. It's had all these years of success. There are more of them being sold now than there has been in the past decade. If you go out here, you'll see several single-place aircraft. There's one really cool one that got lots of attention on my website, the little Merlin Light. But down at the other end of the field, there's at least 2 more new Quicksilvers there, or Smith Silvers, or Smith Quicks, however you want to call them. They're not Quicksilver brand, but they're going to have more Part 103s. Part 103 is alive and well as it is. And yes, you can make a fixed-wing aircraft that meets the standard. You can also do trikes and powered parachutes and other ones that meet the standard. But it's possible to do, but we will not ask them for any change. Next slide, Carol. So here are some statements that FAA has made. These are verbatim. FAA has seen these. They have approved my use of these. These are exactly the words they say. If you can't read them all, I'm going to do it quick here just for you. It's supposed to be bad form to read your own slides, but LSA has been a successful development. FAA doesn't say that readily. They're not saying that about Boeing right now. You can be sure. They got some Boeing issues right now. LSA, get that statement. And the former regulation, the one we are under right now today, was unnecessarily restrictive. When have you heard a government agent say that? Not too often. Opportunities to safely expand this sector of aviation exist. Yes, it does. These are FAA's exact words right out of the mouths of top-rated people in the agency. And FAA wants the revised regulation to, quote, allow the industry to do more. Now, you could read that two ways. They're going to give us more permission. They're also going to say, you do the work. We've already done that. All the standards that every single one of these LSA out here meet were created by people just like you in a setting just like this, where someone said, I'm leading the charge here now. We want to talk about the wing loading of an airplane. What does somebody think? And you would all raise your hands and you go, I think it ought to be this way. I think we ought to do it that way. That's how those regulations got created by ordinary people. FAA people were in the room. They were allowed one vote for all of FAA, and each of you also got a vote. So that was a very egalitarian way to create these standards. They like them so much that now Part 23 aircraft, the Cessnas, Cirruses, Pipers, Diamonds of the world, will be in the future using industry consensus standards to certify those airplanes, just like we do, because LSA did it successfully. That's a very important point. We really won the day in FAA's minds. They don't go out of their way to say that kind of praise too often, but that's what they mean. Next slide, please. So, more weight. I touched on this earlier, that the term they use is called power index. This is not a new invention. If you go Google power index, you'll find it applies to other activities besides aviation, but this is a method of using a formula to decide how much the airplane can weigh. So imagine a two-seat aircraft, but it has a 40-foot wingspan and big, fat, wide wings with thick curvature and whatnot. That airplane will fly pretty slowly, even though it's bigger and heavier. It can still be safe, simple, easy to fly, but it can carry 3,000 pounds perhaps. Might have 4 seats in it. Might have retractable gear. I didn't mention that, but FAA put that on the table, not us. We never thought they'd do that, even though it already exists, because if there's a seaplane, Aventura, Sea Ray, C-Max, Super Petrel, there's 4 examples right there. They all have retractable gear. You might remember FAA, I somewhat humorously called that repositionable gear at first, because they didn't want to say retractable, so they wordsmithed that to make it happen, because you can't have a seaplane with its wheels down land in the water. Not too many times anyway, can land once. So anyway, they're going to go to that. Exactly what will make that up, that's been changing. I would put the formula up here, it'd bore you all to tears, but I didn't do it because it may not be that one. So as I said, all the way through, everything I'm saying here is subject to change. Does that mean what I'm telling you is useless? No, I don't think so, because for in almost every case, all of this is supported by FAA, and there are people inside the agency that will be arguing for all these things. There will be others objecting because that's their duty to object and say, did we think this through before we allow this? They should do it that way, and that's what they're into right now, starting August 5th through September 5th, so we're past that. That month in there is when FAA internally really started looking at this regulation. And I'll get to it when I come to it. But stall is one of the things. Stall is probably going to go up a little bit, at least for larger aircraft, probably to 50 knots. Horsepower will likely be capped at 200 horsepower. That's for the bigger airplanes, obviously. Many of these airplanes don't need any more than what they have now, and they're perfectly fine airplanes. They don't need to change. But if a manufacturer has ambitions about a 4-seater or a retractable gear airplane, they're finally going to get in the game. These same exact airplanes in Europe, exactly like you see here, can be retractable, can have an in-flight adjustable prop, and it seems to be working for them. And FAA studies what other people are doing, just like they study what FAA is doing. And so they have decided that, yes, we think we can put retractable gear in the equation now, but retractable gear is going to cost you some more, so do you really need to go fast? Well, if you do, then Like the auto race guys say, speed costs money. How fast do you want to go? Same thing here. Next slide, please. Speaking of speed, unfortunately, you didn't get to see this airplane here. I put it here because they intended to come here, so now I'm going to be a little mad at FAA for a moment. This airplane's not here because of FAA, not because the airplane couldn't get here, because of weather or other things. They couldn't get the approvals they needed in time. And there's another aircraft here called the Montaire, which is like the Paradise for those of you that knew that airplane. Very, very similar. Same designer, as a matter of fact, did his own thing now and coming out with that. They couldn't get their approvals either. So unfortunately, we had some of those holdbacks in this strange year we're going through, but that airplane is flying very successfully all around Europe. There are a number of them here, but they're all experimental now. In the future, when this rule comes out, that airplane can qualify. You notice it doesn't have any gear. It does have an adjustable prop, and it'll do about 145 knots. I think that airplane will meet the new standard when it comes out, assuming they don't change it radically from what they're talking about now. By the way, this is the JMB Aircraft VL3. That's what that is. I guess they like initials, so no big long words from that company. 4 seats, definitely coming. They may be light personal aircraft, not light sport aircraft. I don't know how that's going to shake out, but we already have examples. This is just a few of them. The Tecnam, of course, that's a certified aircraft. That's not a light sport. And the flight design was going to go through a kind of a hybrid system of both Part 23 and light sport, and that was going to work out. That's now changing. It's not going to be the C4 anymore. If you looked up and down the line, you've seen the flight design, the new F2. Well, there's an F4 as well. And if you look at that F2 carefully, you'll see, yeah, they could put 2 seats in the back of that pretty easily. That's kind of what the F4 is going to be. The Sling 4 is not a certified aircraft. That's a kit aircraft, but that's a very nice flying machine. Flies just as nice as their SLSA model, the 2-seat model. In fact, I have to admit, I kind of like this airplane better than the 2-seater. Flew beautifully, very safe, simple, easy to fly airplane, no problem. And there's more. I didn't do everybody on here. These are just examples, but that's coming. So next slide, please. So here are I told you we boiled it down from 26 things to 4. Here's the 4 we asked for. And we wrote white papers about each one of these. We went to Washington, D.C. 5 times, I think. Sat with the executives, not the administrator himself. He's a politician. Not the people right one level down from him. They're politicians too. I don't say they're not good FAA guys, but they got to be political people in that role, so we don't need to talk to them. But the executive level, right underneath that, we had 8 of them in the room several times. That's significant. You don't get their attention all that easily. They've got people that will visit with you, and then if it really needs to go up, it'll go up. We had an in, and we got in with those folks, and we presented our cases to them. In every case, we not only said we want these things, here's why we think this is reasonable, here's how we think it could go, here's documentation about it, here's statistics based on what we know. We went to some real trouble to do this, and they said, we like what you're doing, guys. You're bringing us good ideas. And we said, yes, not only that, but we'll do a lot of it. And they said, yeah, we like that a lot. Human nature is to let the other guy do it if he will, and they're going to let us do some of it. And in that case, maybe we'll get it right. We'll see about that. Excuse me. Anyway, those are the 4 things that we really went to them with, because we said these are the 4 things we think would best help the industry as they produce airplanes and help the pilots who buy and fly those airplanes. Now the list is longer, as you saw, but these are the things that we went in and really hit hard. Several visits, many FAA calls. I've lost track of how many, but and we have worked with the other member organizations and other groups that are also lobbying FAA, but we had a very good run of it, and we're very pleased about it. We hope all these things will go through. Again, no promises, but I'm pretty hopeful about everything that I've got up here. Next slide, please, Carol. Electric power. I don't know if any of you have ever flown an electric-powered airplane. Probably not many, if any, because it's unusual. I did fly that particular airplane, and it was just like they said. I'll tell you a couple quick stories about it. One was that I got a checklist, and I strapped it onto my leg like pilots often do, because it was all different. It wasn't about RPM. It was about power settings and how much kilowatts you had left instead of fuel. it was a little bit of a strange experience, and the thing said on it very clearly, if kilowatts get down to 66, get back to the airport. I roll out to the end of the runway, I take off, right on takeoff, I'm halfway down the runway, it's at 65. What am I supposed to do, go right back? No, you just pull the throttle back just a little, or the rheostat is what it really is. I call it a throttle, but it's just like the thing on your music player, whatever you have. And I dialed it back just a little bit, jumped back up to 80. I ended up flying around for about 30 minutes, and it was cool because at, I don't know, 500, 600, 800 feet off the ground, I could hear trucks backing up. I could hear people talking. I don't think they could hear me. I didn't try and talk to them, but I couldn't understand them, but I could hear them. You wouldn't do that in a gasoline-powered aircraft. So it was very cool, very quiet, nicely done. Snap the batteries out, put new batteries in, you got another hour's flying. So that's coming, but it's not limited to that now. And by the way, down here on the bottom, there's a number of electric projects. You've certainly seen that in the news media. There's more to come. Next slide, please. But they didn't just stop at electric power. FAA on their own said, no, we're going to allow hybrid too. A gasoline engine in an aircraft that can recharge the batteries. This particular airplane, this individual right here, this is an aircraft called the C-42. We knew it in the U.S. for a short time as a Cyclone. Not here today, but it's Germany's most popular light sport type aircraft. And this guy put, as you see, he's got a generator engine in it, fuel tank. This is in the aft cabin where he's pointing. He's pointing at the red piece you can see in the left picture. Up front is an electric motor and some batteries. He flies this thing all over Europe. Hundreds of miles of range. So that's the beauty of hybrid. You can have electric power with the quietness, but of course you got to deal with a gasoline engine as well. So, and obviously this is more complex, more expensive, and things like that. But at least they're opening the door to let people explore. That aircraft may never happen. There may be the only one ever. Somebody else might figure out a better way to do it, and that's what we like. Let innovation flower where it can. Don't hold it back with unnecessary regulation. It's kind of our mantra. Next slide, please. SLSA gyros, I think I saw, yeah, there's Greg Greminger. He fought this battle for years. Kept getting, I won't say slapped down, or I guess I did say it, but anyway, it went nowhere for a long time, didn't it, Greg? And that's unfortunate, but we're standing on his shoulders now, and we went back to him and said, look, you got to clean this up, guys. This is just not right. And they said, well, the statistics show they're dangerous. Well, yeah, they were back in the 60s, which is the only information they had. So they said, you got to give us some U.S. statistics. They said, well, we can't do that because you don't allow fully built airplanes. Well, get it from the experimentals. Well, that's all fine and good, but every single experimental is different. The pilot or the builder does something different to it. So you don't have a consistency. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. That's great, but it's not a way to evaluate something. If every single one of them is different, you don't know what's going right and what's going wrong. So we said, you got to allow this. It's huge in Europe. You already know this. It's all held back by a group called the Rotorcraft Directorate, which if that doesn't sound Soviet, I'm not sure what does. But anyway, those guys are gone now. The directorates are gone. They don't do that anymore. Maybe they use that word, but those guys are gone, and the log jam is over, and we are quite sure of all the things I've mentioned here, this is the one I'm most sure of. Still could get shot down, but I don't think so. So we're really happy about that. These have been a big hit. They're quite economical. They're loads of fun. Greg and I had a ball out here last year doing stuff. He says that when we made the video, I had to keep saying, this is okay to be doing this, because it looks like you shouldn't be doing that in an airplane. I think they're that much fun. I love the gyros. I'm not a regular pilot of them. I've never soloed, but I would do it in a minute if I just had time to put more time into it. But next slide, please. Single lever control. This is not new. The airplane in the bottom right there, you should recognize that's a Cirrus. Cirrus has had single lever control since the very first model came out on the market early in 2000, just about 9/11 actually. And they have had that all along. Single lever just means there's no prop control. There may be a manifold pressure gauge or that information may be available to you, but you don't need it. A computer controls what needs to be done. And as we know, computers are dumb, but they can act really quickly and they don't forget things. Well, usually they don't. And so a computer can do a good job of what you need. So we simplified how that could work with the image on the left. which my friend Roy Beiswinger of Powered Sport Flying. Vicki, are you still here? I don't see her right now. Anyway, she's got Powered Sport Flying magazines here. Please pick one up. You get one for free. You'll see a lot of good stuff in there. He designed this thing. So if you think about it, you got a throttle lever. You're sitting at the end of the runway. You want to go. You want to take off. Where would you like the prop? In climb mode. You want to get up and away from the ground as quick as you can, get past the obstacles. Then once you get up at altitude, you don't want that anymore. Now you're using more fuel and you're not going as fast as you could go. So you back it off a little bit. And the computer says, we're at such and so altitude, we're going X fast. You don't want to be in climb mode anymore. You don't have the nose pointed up. And it can figure that stuff out. It's fairly simple, actually. And so it goes into cruise mode. When you come back in for landing, that prop can go back into the right pitch for takeoff again. And it knows all this stuff. So the pilot workload is 0. You put the throttle where you want it. The system figures out how to do it, but you get the benefit. And we stressed the safety of an adjustable prop. It's not a constant speed prop. That's a different animal, but it is a workable system. And I had a personal experience that weeks before we went to CFAA, and I said, I sat down at Sun and Fun flying an airplane that had been, I'm not going to reveal what airplane it was, actually no longer on the market, but they had flown it a long, long way, so they had it in cruise mode because it can't be adjustable. And we, on a hot day down in Florida, on a grass runway with a pilot that was good but not deeply experienced, and we rolled and rolled and rolled, and the signs kept flashing by on the side, and we weren't off the ground yet, but we're going pretty fast now. It got a little tense. It was no problem as it turned out, but a climb prop would have made all the difference in the world. So I went to FAA and said, look, here's my personal experience. This is not about going fast. You've limited us to 120 knots indicated, so we can't go any faster than that. This is about safety. Safety is FAA's main message, and that's stuck. So I think we'll get single lever control. Again, that'll add more cost, but that's at first. And later, other smart people will come along and go, oh, you don't have to do all that. If you just did this, I don't know what that would be, but some other control mechanisms, that'll do the same job, and it'll be half the price. On this Sea Ray here, that's both amateur built, and that one's amateur built, but they also make an SLSA version of the Sea Ray from Progressive Aerodyne, also down in Florida, neighbors of mine kind of. That aircraft has had single lever control on it, probably close to 5 years now, hundreds of hours on the airplane. That's a $15,000 option to have that. That's pretty expensive. Maybe it's what it has to be. I'm not faulting them, but I believe that later we'll end up down at a couple $1,000s. That's my prediction. We'll see how right I am about that, but it's coming, and it'll make your flying safer without making it harder. That's a good thing. Next slide, please. Aerial work I mentioned, that's the big one. Now I'm just showing, and I want to stress what just popped up there in the bottom of the screen. FAA says, well, not cargo hauling, not passenger hauling for hire. And we went, no, we're not looking for that. We're looking for other things. At the top right, you see a CTSW. That's a little earlier version of the Flight Design CT series, fitted with cameras. This was bought by law enforcement people in Oklahoma. And the camera mounted out there on the wing, that's what the circle is that's a camera that can watch things and whatnot. They said, this airplane is great for this. We love it, and we would like to have more of that kind of thing. Public use is what that's termed. Doesn't have to meet any certification. They can do anything they want. The police can buy any kind of aircraft they want, no certification, no approval, whatever they think they can use profitably or successfully. That's good. They can do that. So that, and several others, other airplanes too. I just happen to have some images of the Flight Design, but powered parachutes have been used commercially. Gyro planes have been used commercially by law enforcement or people in public use where they don't have to abide by the same rules the rest of us do. Down at the bottom, right there, that's an airplane called a Dragonfly, which was custom designed to pull hang gliders aloft. That's its entire purpose. You can point that thing full power, stick full forward, dive it right at the ground. It will not go faster than 55. I have tried it. You can't make it go faster than 55 miles an hour. That's perfect for what's called micro spraying, which is very good for small fields, for certain, I don't know anything about agricultural flying, but I'm told that that's actually quite an efficient method of applying chemicals to crops. So those kinds of activities will be coming, and more, we believe. FAA is open to the idea, and we're going to run with that as much as they'll let us if it passes. We'll see about that. Next slide, please. So a lot of questions then have come up about, well, what can sport pilots fly? And by the way, now, this talk is purposely intended to be a little shorter because I'm hoping you'll have some questions. What one of you has a question in your mind, 5 other people might have in their mind too, and they may choose not to say it. So please do speak up if you have questions. I don't have all the answers, I'll tell you that right up front, but I've got some of them, and I'll do my best to give you my thought about it. Mechanics has been another one that came up. Well, and for example, what does your typical A&P know about a hybrid electric system? Probably almost nothing. Now, some car guys probably do because the Prius and others have been out there for years. That's a hybrid system. So it's not rocket science, but it's not what an A&P gets trained for. The same is true with an LSRM, light sport, repairman, mechanic, which are the people that can do considerable amount of work on your aircraft for you. So they and A&Ps, they haven't been trained in hybrid or other things that may come. How are they going to handle that? It's a different division in FAA than the aircraft certification group that we normally talk to. It's called Flight Standards, and those guys will control that and the pilot license side of it. And we don't have many answers for you yet, but they said this will probably be something that ASTM figures out. ASTM is a group that got together, the group of, like all of you, that got together and wrote the consensus standards. They will now be doing things that will define what a mechanic can do as well. And they may even have some input to the pilot side of it, although FAA kind of likes to keep that for themselves. But there's lots of organizations. The biggest and most successful of them is Rainbow Aviation, I believe it is. They just moved from California to Missouri, but they have trained, I don't know, thousands, I think, of LSRMs. And they will be on top of this and all over it when it comes out. I'm sure they'll have classes for everybody, but they probably will allow the industry to do this, which is a good thing. Next slide, please. So, one of the big questions is, when are we going to see this thing? That same statement that brought out the 3,600 pounds, I don't know quite what Jack was thinking then, but he said it was going to come out in December of 2019. Well, there was no way. They weren't even close to ready. They're still not close to ready. So, when are we going to see this? Definitely not in 2020. I don't think we'll see it in 2021. My prediction is that we will see the NPRM. That's the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. That's boring government talk, but it means something to you because when they come out with that, I hope you will plow through some of that. Magazines and people like myself will try and simplify it for you, but then write them and tell them what you think. Whatever's on your mind, tell them. And the more comments they get, the better. In fact, more comments show interest. So if we really want this thing to go somewhere and you want some of the privileges we've been talking about here, let them know. Tell your friends. Have them write. I know I'm not a letter writer to Congress people either or FAA, but in this case, I hope you'll step up to the plate and do that. That, I think, will come out. My guess is you'll see that just before Oshkosh 2021, which is only next year now, because they need 16 months after the NPRM is released before they can look at they have to read every single comment that comes in. They do not have a choice about that. If there's 50,000 comments, they have to read every one and deal with them, log them all in. What was that about? What did they want? They won't write back to you, but they'll do all that. And so we'll see that then. But, then it's 16 months from then. They have to have it done by the end of 2023 because they got some money out of Congress a couple of years ago. In that was that the regulation, in the authorization for more budget for FAA was the requirement that they have this regulation done no later than December 31st, 2023. So what is my prediction about when it will be done? December 30th, 2023. Why be any sooner? I don't think we'll see it before then. I'll be shocked if it comes out. The NPRM will be out, I think, in 2021 sometime, but they can't get the rule done. There's a process they've got to go through, and they have no choice about it, so they can't speed it up for anybody's purpose. Okay, one more slide, and I think we're... Oh yeah, I just wanted to stress that in case you think FAA is sitting around on their thumbs at home doing Zoom calls and not really working too much, well, that may be true of some of them. I can't attest to that, but most of the people that we've talked to in FAA have been some really fine people, understand what we want. Actually, quite a few of them do fly aircraft, and some of them fly light aircraft. In fact, one of the very top guys in FAA flew a Titan Tornado, built and flew a Titan Tornado. If you don't know what that is, it's very much like one of these. And so FAA does enjoy this class of aviation as well, at least some of them. Some of them are just about airline, and that's fine. They need to do that too, but they're into this. But they've got a lot of work. This is a great big regulation. It's not just about LSA. It also talks about things you can do with warbirds. It also talks about professional build centers, which is definitely going to come. I think that's almost a sure thing. It already happens, but they're gonna open the door a lot wider on that. So if you want a kit plane, getting help building it will be much easier in the future, I believe. And so we are just one piece of that. We're a substantial piece of it, but we're just one piece of a great big regulation. Okay, next slide, please, Carol. So I want to thank you for your attention today, but mainly now I would like to open this up to some questions. Oh yeah, come on up here. I would like, my wife is showing me this. If you are a producer, we would love to give you one of these. Why join Llama? As I said, we are a volunteer organization. I'm its president. I don't get paid one dime of salary. I do get some travel expenses covered. That's what we use the dues for. But mainly why it's important, if you're a producer or you know a producer, ask them to join, because then FAA says, okay, you're representing a lot of people. That's good. We want more people in. And I mentioned earlier that my partner, Roy Beiswinger, on all this work, produces this magazine. They're out here and available. Where are they?
A few on the chairs back there, but Vicki has a table over by the hangar.
Okay. Table in front of the hangar. As you came through the terminal, there's a table out there. Go get one. I think you'll like it. Hey, it's free. You know, how can you go wrong with that? And she helps us with the Llama work as well, so you can talk to her about that if that's of interest. Okay, having done that now, what I'd like to hear is any questions you've got about this, what's going to happen. I'll do my best. What I will do is, so that the video gets all this, I'm going to repeat your question, so say it as loud as you can, but I'm going to repeat it. If I can summarize that, it's not a constant speed prop. It doesn't work the same way with that. It doesn't have a governor the same way. It's computer controlled now. You know, when constant speed came out, there weren't any computers. So it had to be mechanical, which is even clunkier and more expensive and subject to problems. This will all be electronically controlled now. And that airplane knows how high you are, how fast you're going, how high you have the RPM set, and other factors. And it can assess that, you know, hundreds of times a second. So, oh yeah, no, the pitch changes. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, significantly it can. But you don't do anything. You don't go, I need a little more. No, it's gonna. And so it's kind of like an automatic transmission. No, it doesn't change the engine. No, just like a constant speed, the engine RPM will stay the same. Well, after you set the throttle, but then the prop will go. I see. We're here. We are at 7,500 feet, and you're not trying to climb, and you're going pretty fast. So you must want this in cruise mode. And at this altitude, it knows some atmospheric stuff. It'll go a little bit more, and probably give you a little bit. You know, so it'll work. It's beautiful. If you've ever flown like a Cirrus, you just push the throttle where you want it. Actually, a Cirrus is a two control because they have to have a mixture as well. The Rotax engines, there's no mixture. So it's literally one lever, and that's all you need. Another question? SLSA aircraft what? Oh, can't fly. Is there IFR flying? Is that what that's the question? Yes. It's not really part of this regulation, but let me tell you a little bit about that. First of all, IFR was never prohibited for light sport aircraft. It was prohibited for a sport pilot certificate holder. The airplane was never restricted. Some years ago, FAA came and said, we think you ASTM standards writing people ought to prohibit that. And partly that was because they wanted to see something more about it. They didn't just want it to happen willy-nilly. But also because they said, look, you know, all these Cessna, Diamond, Cirrus, Piper guys have spent a lot of money to get approval to do things. If you just waltz in and get it for free, so to speak, they're going to push back and you're going to have problems. So come up with a standard. In the meantime, prohibit it. So the ASTM standards prohibit, but they don't have any jurisdiction. They can't prohibit anything. But FAA accepts that standard. That's the official term, and they accept that standard. Well, it had prohibition in it. So in a sense, it is prohibited, but it's not. So it's one of those fuzzy things. So what some producers have figured out, and they are right to do this, this is perfectly legal, get your SLSA in, get its approval as an SLSA, then register it as an ELSA. Then you still got to have the right equipment in it according to the list, 121.91 if I remember correctly, which is a simple list. I mean, every flat screen out here has got twice that, so it's easy to do. But if you do that, then you can fly IFR, and you could file and fly in the IFR system. Does that make sense? Well, yes, it does, because every single experimental aircraft built in the United States can fly IFR with no certification, no approval whatsoever, just that little list. And a Cessna 172, which is, I've flown 172 on instruments quite a bit, was never certified for IFR flight. It's been doing it for years and years and years. So why not these things? These are in many ways more capable and definitely have better instrumentation. Why not? Assuming, of course, the pilot is qualified and the rest of the usual things. So I think, will that get formalized with this? I don't know. That hasn't really come out, but I believe it will. And there is an active program, again, within ASTM to come up with a standard for instrument flying. As soon as that's done, it's not as easy as it sounds, and they're fighting about it, and it hasn't happened yet, but I think it will. As soon as they've got a standard, FAA has never refused a standard that the ASTM committee has come up with. They've accepted every single one. So I think it'll come and be more formalized as we move along. Greg, yes, the standards, ASTM is working on addressing some things that they know are coming, that they believe are coming. Of course, you can't write a standard about something that's not defined yet. You know, how do you know exactly what the standards should say until they say what you can do? So it's kind of a cooperative thing, but ASTM is very aware of all of this. I serve on the executive committee. We have a monthly phone call. This comes up every single month, and they will do that. Now, the regulation, of course, that's totally FAA. They are writing that, and that is mostly written, but it's a draft. And the draft is going to change. We just don't know how much. So it's kind of a give and take between ASTM and FAA as to how this all gets done. And it'll be a bit of a race toward the end. Everybody would like it to happen soon, but there's quite a bit of work to do to make this the right thing. Did that answer the question, Greg? For the most part, not long at all, because a lot of it's not really changing too much in the sense of what the standards need to call out. For example, ASTM already has a retractable gear standard. They have it now. Because in other countries use ASTM standards too. That's not just an American thing. China uses ASTM standards, for example. That's about as different a country as you can get, I'm thinking. Iran uses ASTM standards. So, there's a couple of examples. But so ASTM has already done some of the work. ASTM already has a whole electric standard already done. It's been done for years. Just couldn't do it because the regulation didn't allow it. So they'll have some stuff in place right away. I'm sure there's going to be a couple of laggards that, well, why aren't you done with that yet? The single lever control, that's also an active standard going on right now, like IFR is. So, but it's a bunch of people literally just like you that do that. And you can join ASTM, $75 a year. It's not even expensive. You get a vote. Your vote is just as good as anybody else. No company can have more than one vote, that kind of thing. So it's very egalitarian, as I mentioned, and you can participate. If you have engineering knowledge or you're just interested or you want to be part of that, please sign up for ASTM. You are right in there. You can behave just like the rest of us do, which hopefully is good. Any other questions? All right, told you everything I know, so that's it. You don't need to ask me any more questions because I don't know anymore. Thank you so much for coming today.